Hi everyone, welcome to Midnight Storytime. Before watching the video, please give me a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. After being diagnosed with terminal lung cancer at the hospital, the first thing I did when I got home was kidnap the beautiful older woman I had secretly loved for 8 years. A month later, I realized that aside from feeling a bit weak, I was in no pain at all. Right then, the hospital called to apologize, saying they had swapped my results and I was perfectly healthy. In that moment, absolute panic set in. Looking at the girl sleeping soundly on my bed, I knew I had to do something drastic. I fled the country for 3 years. 3 years later, I returned. During a company retreat, my colleagues pressured me into getting drunk. When I woke up, my legs were bound by those same familiar silver chains. But this time, I wasn't lying next to just one person, but two, one adult and one child. The little girl looked exactly like a miniature version of Yvonne. I froze. The woman spoke, her voice like ice. "Julian, you abandoned us to live a happy life abroad. Are you satisfied now?" Moments earlier, the doctor at Patacano Hospital had looked at me with a calm, clinical voice. "Sir, you have terminal lung cancer. We need to begin palliative care immediately." At the hospital gates, I stood dazed by the roadside, clutching a month's worth of painkillers. The doctor's words echoed in my head, dragging me into a pit of despair. I was only 23, just starting my internship. My youth was supposed to be ahead of me. To be handed a death sentence like this. I hadn't even had the chance to confess to Yvonne. Was I really going to die in a month? I cried the whole way home. The taxi driver, seeing me come out of the hospital, sensed my state of mind. He guessed part of the truth. Before I got out, he said, "Son, there is no pain that doesn't eventually pass. Living for the moment is what matters most." I returned to my empty villa alone. The driver's words kept ringing in my head. Live for the moment. Suddenly, I made a monumental decision. I opened my phone and placed an order for a heavy silver chain. If I only had a month to live, I refused to die with regrets. The delivery arrived quickly. By the time I finished my last normal meal, the package was at my door. Looking at the silver chain in my hands, I took a deep breath. I opened the chat pinned at the very top of my messages. "Yvonne, I'm feeling a bit sick today. Could you come over and look after me for a while?" The reply came instantly. "Wait for me. She would be here in half an hour." While waiting, I took a sleeping pill and dropped it into a glass of water. Sitting on the sofa, my heart was hammering against my ribs. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of the door echoed through the quiet house. I took a deep breath and opened it. Standing before me was a woman in professional office attire. Her silhouette was captivating, and her forehead was beaded with light sweat. She had clearly rushed here the moment she finished work. Seeing her like that, a flicker of guilt rose within me, but it only made my resolve firmer. She stepped inside, worry etched on her face, and pulled me toward the sofa. "Why don't you feel well, Julian? Let me take you to the hospital." Watching her care for me, my eyes welled up with tears. Her name is Yvonne. When I was 15, my parents kicked me out of the house. It was she who took me in, raised me, and paid for my education. Later, I became an assistant at her company. Over the years, she has been my entire world. The villa I live in was a gift from her for my 18th birthday. She once said that when I eventually found a girlfriend, she wouldn't disturb us. But since that winter day, when she carried me out of the snow and into her home, I knew I could never love anyone else. Now, knowing I'm about to die, the shadow of death has made me reckless. "Talk to me, Julian. What does it hurt? Stop scaring me." Seeing my silence, her panic increased. I gave her a weak smile. "Drink some water first, then I'll tell you." Exhausted and thirsty, she drained the glass, the one spiked with the sleeping pill. Seeing the empty glass, I felt a wave of relief. Then I looked her straight in the eyes. "Yvonne," I said solemnly, "I love you. I've loved you since the day you saved me. Can we be together?" I had intended to give her a choice. I didn't want to possess her through such cowardly means. But life had dealt me a cruel hand, and the response was a blow to the heart. Yvonne froze, her expression shifting to anger. "You aren't sick at all. You're lying to me." With that, she grabbed her bag, intending to leave. I let out a bitter laugh. It was just as I thought. she would reject me. But as she reached the door, she stumbled and collapsed. I caught her quickly, looking down at the woman sleeping soundly in my arms. My heart was trembling and racing all at once. I carried her to the bathroom, washed her, and then took the silver chain I had just bought. I locked it around her ankle. Once finished, I opened her phone, found her private secretary's contact, and sent a message. I have to go away on business for a month. Do not contact me during this time. The company will be managed by Julian for now. Send electronic copies of any important documents. I will have Julian bring them to me for my signature. The reply came back almost instantly. Understood. I looked at the message and smiled thinly. Fortunately, after graduation, I started working directly at her company. Everyone there knows our close relationship, so the idea of me handling her paperwork wouldn't raise any suspicion. I tidied up the room quickly. The most important thing now was to take my own painkillers. Because Yvonne has always been very sensitive to pain, I watched her as she slept soundly beside me. A surge of intense emotion rose within me. I had loved this woman for 8 years. In my heart, she had always been the only one. Tonight, finally, I was sharing a bed with her. By then, the clock already pointed to 11 p.m. I gently wrapped my arms around her and drifted into sleep. The next morning, Yvonne slowly stirred. The moment she opened her eyes, she found herself locked in a firm embrace. Looking up, she saw my face inches from hers. Her expression shifted instantly, her face pale with fury. With a powerful kick, she sent me tumbling off the bed. "Julian, let go of me. Don't you ever show your face to me again." Yvonne attempted to stand and get dressed, but a sudden, icy chill around her ankle made her freeze. Looking down, she saw a silver chain tightly coiled around her ankle. She began to shake with rage, especially upon realizing she didn't have a single stitch of clothing on. Although she felt no signs of having been violated, which brought a brief flicker of relief, she looked at me as I rubbed my head, waking up, and she ground her teeth in anger. Before she could scream, I grabbed both of her wrists and pinned her down beneath me. I was still groggy, my mind lingering on the sweet dreams of the night before. Being kicked awake had jolted me, but hearing her angry rebukes still made my heart ache. Even though I knew she would be furious, facing it was almost unbearable. But things had gone too far. There was no turning back now. Besides, I only had a month to live. What did it matter if I lost everything? In 18 years, I'll be a man again. When I looked up, I caught her gaze, but then my eyes drifted down. In the room with the curtains drawn tight, the thick darkness seemed to swallow my reason. Desire eclipsed logic. I didn't want to be a coward for even one more second. When I woke up again at 6 p.m., Yvonne was sitting on the edge of the bed. Her eyes were as cold as ice. Panicking, I tried to deflect. "Yvonne, I'll go make some porridge. You must be hungry." She said nothing, and that silence was the most terrifying thing of all. I scrambled into my clothes and fled the room as if running for my life. She sat there watching my retreating back, her expression complex, her face slightly flushed. Finally, with a long sigh, she reached into the closet, took one of my white shirts, and headed into the bathroom. Fortunately, the chain I had bought was long enough to allow her to move around the villa without much restriction. A short while later, I returned to the room carrying a bowl of hot porridge. Yvonne had finished her bath and was wearing my shirt. Her silky black hair was still damp, and the thin fabric of the shirt clung to her skin. For a moment, I was dazed. "If you keep going, I'll die right here," she said coldly, her voice light as she noticed my ragged breathing. I could only manage a forced smile and quickly scooped up some porridge to feed her. Yvonne glared at me, but she opened her mouth and ate anyway. Seeing her lack of resistance made me feel a wave of relief. "Julian, unlock the chain. I have to get to the office. There are too many documents that need my attention." She didn't mention a word about last night. Her tone was icy and decisive. I just smiled. "Don't worry about the company. I've already taken care of everything for you. I'll handle all the necessary paperwork." With that, I opened her phone to show her the messages with Secretary Sarah, then immediately tucked it away, ensuring she couldn't touch any electronic devices. Yvonne looked at the man standing before her, her heart filled with rage and helplessness. It turns out he planned everything from the start. Terrifyingly meticulous, she thought, gritting her teeth. Had I known, I never would have given him so much power. The next morning, I placed breakfast by the bed. Seeing her pale face, a twinge of regret surfaced. I should have exercised more self-control last night. She probably hates me to the bone now. But then I reconsidered. Since yesterday, she hadn't exactly rejected me. An involuntary smile touched my lips. Perhaps she's starting to accept me? I tidied up the room and left the villa for the office. Back in the bedroom, Yvonne sat silently, watching my retreating figure with a gaze that was conflicted and unreadable. At the office, after a frantic day working from the CEO's desk to clear the backlog, I brought the most important files back to the villa for her review. When I arrived, Yvonne looked at the stack of folders in my hand, a cold smirk playing on her lips. "You're quite something, Julian. Last night, you were like an ox. My whole body still aches, and just as I've recovered a bit, you're making me work in the evening. What are you smiling at? Just sign them. And don't even think about trying to get your phone back, or I guarantee you won't be able to get out of bed tomorrow." Her smile made me feel uneasy, so I glared back with a threat. She was clearly intimidated by my words and fell silent, picking up the pen to sign the documents. While she worked, I hurried to the kitchen to cook dinner. This routine continued for half a month. By day, I handled the company's affairs in her stead. By night, I brought the work home for her approval. But after more than 15 days of living together, I realized she made no attempt to escape. Every time I returned home, I found her sitting on the balcony reading, quiet and obedient. She still wore only my oversized white shirt, a sight that made my heart ache with tenderness and flutter with excitement. Except for the days of her period, I waited every night for her to finish signing the papers before I inevitably pushed her down to kiss her. And she would respond gently, offering no resistance at all. Those days were bittersweet, but the weight of my 1-month deadline hung heavy in my soul. Every time the thought crossed my mind, my heart sank, and I would pull her into an even tighter embrace, desperate to savor every final second. Fortunately, the painkillers I had been taking kept the physical agony at bay. However, my body was visibly weakening. I had lost a significant amount of weight. That night, as we lay beside each other, Yvonne looked at me with a mixture of helplessness and lingering anger. "How long do you plan on keeping me locked up? Doing this every single day. Don't you ever get tired?" "I'll let you go in a week," I whispered. "Can't you just rest for a few days? You look so frail." "Frail? Who's frail?" I smirked, my pride as a man flaring up. "Let me show you if I'm frail or not. A man should never say he can't." In my mind, I blamed my weakened state on the lung cancer. How dare she say I wasn't up to the task? I was determined to prove her wrong. Time flew by. There were only 3 days left until the 1-month mark. "Hello, is this Mr. Julian?" The caller ID was from the hospital. I assumed they were calling again to urge me to seek treatment. There are only 3 days left. Treatment is pointless. I'm not coming in, so stop calling me. "Mr. Julian, you've misunderstood," the voice on the other end said frantically. "There's been a grave mistake on the hospital's part. Your diagnostic report was swapped. You are, in fact, perfectly healthy. The patient who actually has the illness shared the same name as you. He passed away this morning at 6 a.m. I felt dizzy. My ears rang, and only one sentence echoed in the void. Your body is perfectly healthy. I wasn't sick. I wasn't going to die. But the realization hit me like a freight train. If I wasn't dying, then in 3 days, I would have to release her. And then, I would go to prison. I couldn't let that happen. I was so young. How could I let my life rot behind bars? Should I go back and apologize? No, she would never forgive me. Tell her the truth? Even worse, she'd think I was making up a story to escape the consequences of my crimes. My mind raced, searching for a way to earn her forgiveness in 3 days. Suddenly, a car horn snapped me out of my thoughts. By some incredible coincidence, the driver was the same middle-aged man who had driven me before. "Oh, it's you. You're looking much better than last time." "I'm doing okay, sir. Actually, can I ask you something?" If someone accidentally offended the one person they shouldn't have, if they're hated beyond forgiveness and terrified of going to jail, what should they do? I looked at the driver, a flicker of hope rising. This was the man who had taught me the philosophy that led me to claim Yvonne in the first place. Now, I prayed he could show me a way out. That's easy, the driver chuckled. Go abroad. Come back in 3 years. Even the deepest resentment fades with time, the old man said, narrowing his eyes slightly. Asking a question like that, don't tell me that someone is you? Of course not, I lied quickly. I just saw a video where someone asked that. I wanted to hear your take on it. Ah, I see. Well then, good luck. Listen to me, kid. Go abroad and come back in 3 years. Everything will be different by then. I forced a laugh and made up a random excuse to end the conversation. Even the Jade Emperor hasn't taken a wife. How could I dare laugh at anyone? Haha, goodbye, young man. Before driving off, the driver left me with one final piece of advice. No matter what happens, you must have the courage to face it. Don't do things that will make you live in regret later. I stood at the entrance of the office building, watching the taxi disappear into the distance. My heart was racing. I hurried up to the office, passing Secretary Sarah without even bothering to say hello. I had suddenly remembered something. A few days ago, the company announced a 3-year overseas project that still hadn't been claimed. That project was now my perfect escape. However, I had no idea that as I rushed away, Sarah was staring intently at the hospital bag in my hand. She pulled out her phone, snapped a photo, and sent it to Yvonne. CEO Yvonne, Julian's health hasn't looked great lately. Do you have any plans to come back to the office and check on things? A month had passed, and that message, along with many others, had received no response. It only fueled Sarah's curiosity. Where exactly was Yvonne that she could be this busy? Over the next 2 days, I finalized the paperwork for the overseas project and began my exit visa application. When the news broke, the entire company was shocked, Sarah included. But I offered no explanations. Once the night passed, I would be leaving the country at 8 a.m. tomorrow. And once I was gone, I wouldn't have to face a prison cell. When I returned home that evening, the first thing I heard was her voice. Julian, when are you going to let me go? It was always the same question. Looking into her steady, unwavering gaze, a wave of desperate, frantic longing surged within me. Tonight, I wanted to let go one last time. This might be my very last chance. I was so forceful that it took Yvonne's breath away. She seemed to sense that something was different. She simply stayed silent and cooperated. It wasn't until nearly 3 a.m. that Yvonne began to cry, her voice choked with a sobbing plea. But I couldn't hear a thing. Only one thought occupied my mind. This is the last time. From this moment on, we would have nothing left to do with each other. I wanted to leave the deepest possible mark on her heart. At 6 a.m., I got up to wash my face and pack a few personal belongings. I prepared breakfast and left it in a thermal pot to keep warm. I turned her phone back on and placed it next to her pillow. Finally, I unlocked the silver chain that had bound her for an entire month. Her ankle was marred with faint red marks. I stroked that spot gently for a long time, then leaned down to press a soft kiss to her forehead, leaving a note behind. Then, I left the house and caught a taxi to the airport. At 8 a.m., the plane took off. I leaned back in my seat, so exhausted that I couldn't resist the pull of sleep. The 11-hour flight was just enough time to sleep off the weight of that final night with her. At 3 p.m. that same day, back at the villa, the phone rang, jolting Yvonne from her weary slumber. CEO Yvonne, Julian mentioned he was returning to the office today. When should we expect you back? Still dazed, she answered with a raspy, But as soon as the word left her lips, her face flushed crimson, and she hung up abruptly. She didn't understand why I had suddenly turned her phone back on, but she didn't have the energy to dwell on it. Yvonne struggled to get out of bed, but her legs were weak, and she collapsed onto the floor. On the table lay the note I had left. Yvonne, I'm gone. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm still young. I still have a future. Please don't sue me. Staring at the paper in her hand, Yvonne froze, her entire body trembling. Every memory from the past month came rushing back like a blade cutting into her heart. In the bathroom, she sat in the tub, silently scrolling through her recent messages. When she saw the text from Sarah about me flying abroad that morning, her pupils contracted sharply. It was true, I was gone. She let out a laugh, but it lasted only a second before turning into an icy chill. She hurled the phone against the wall, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. A single tear fell, sending a tiny ripple through the bathwater. Julian, you're something else. Coming when you want, leaving when you're bored. You'd better never come back. Meanwhile, I was still fast asleep on the plane. I never once imagined the scene 3 years later, when I would have to face the full force of Yvonne's fury. 4 p.m. A certain airport. Julian, over here. A man standing next to a Ferrari waved his hand to call me over. Seeing him, I couldn't help but grin. It was my best friend, Victor. You left without a word and just ran off to another country? You're drinking with me at the party tonight. No excuses. As we drove, he chattered incessantly about the past 3 years. I listened in silence, but my mind was occupied only by Yvonne. It had been 3 years. I wondered if she still hated me. If she did, I'd probably have to resign immediately. Anyway, I'm really not doing that again. Julian, are you even listening to me? Since we were pressed for time, my luggage was sent straight to Victor's place. He chuckled as he spoke. You have no idea, man. After you left, your big sister, Yvonne, soared like a rocket. Every company that ever tried to compete with her has gone bankrupt. She's now the most powerful person in the city. No one dares to cross her. I saw her once last month. Just one look from her sent a chill down my spine. I sat on the sofa, listening in a daze. I hadn't expected Yvonne to become quite this formidable, but a part of me still felt a flicker of pride and joy for her. At 8 p.m., I grabbed one of Victor's suits and headed to the gala with him. When I asked why we weren't just drinking at a private bar, he just grinned. Apparently, a big player was attending tonight's gala, and he wanted me to help him get an introduction. I stayed silent, speechless. I hadn't been home in 3 years. How could I possibly know any big players? The VIP wasn't expected until 9 p.m., so Victor and I hid in a corner, nursing our drinks. After a trip to the restroom, a figure suddenly appeared behind me as I was washing my hands. The man was wearing a maroon suit. His face bore a striking resemblance to mine, and he stood there with a mocking smirk. As soon as I recognized him, my gaze turned icy. It was Leo, my half-brother. Years ago, I was kicked out of my house because of his schemes. But today was my first day back in the country. I just wanted to celebrate with my friend, not start trouble. I tried to walk past him, but Leo let out a dry, taunting laugh. Did you come to this gala today just to watch me propose to Yvonne? I frowned. What did you just say? Hearing him call her name so intimately made me snap. I glared at him with eyes as sharp as knives, but he only laughed harder. You don't know? After you ran off abroad, Yvonne started taking me to all sorts of events. She even put me in charge of the company's key projects. Tonight, I'm officially going to be with her. I really should thank you. If you hadn't disappeared for 3 years, I never would have had the chance to get this close to her. His words were like daggers to my heart. I clenched my fists, a single sentence echoing in my mind. Tonight, Leo and Yvonne will be together. My chest throbbed with a sharp pain. Does she still hate me that much? She knows how much I despise him. Yet she chose him of all people to be by her side. I ignored his jeers and quietly returned to the table, draining my glass in one gulp. I finally realized that the big player Victor mentioned was her. But I couldn't find any joy in it. My first day back, and I have to watch the woman I love get proposed to by my worst enemy. The thought of them together tonight was unbearable. My heart burned with a searing, white-hot rage. Victor noticed my mood shift instantly. He tried to intervene as he saw me draining glass after glass, but one look at the hollow vacancy in my eyes made him sigh and join me in silence. An hour later, we were both completely wasted. It was at that exact moment that the raucous noise of the gala suddenly died down. A woman in a high-end designer gown stepped into the hall. Her gaze swept across the room, eventually halting at the dim corner where I sat, head slumped, drifting in a drunken stupor. Her expression softened for a fraction of a second as she prepared to walk toward me, but another figure cut her off. Under the watchful eyes of the elite, a man dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring. "Yvonne, I love you. Will you be with me?" The spotlight hit them both. The crowd erupted in cheers, some even shouting, "Say yes! Say yes!" The roar of the room jolted me awake. Seeing the scene unfolding before me felt like a serrated blade twisting in my chest. I wanted to lunge forward to stop it, but what right did I have? I quietly raised my glass and took another long gulp. But this time, the alcohol wasn't sharp. It was just bitter, coating my tongue in ash. Leo spotted me, and his lips curled into a cold, triumphant smirk before he turned back to Yvonne with a look of feigned devotion. "Yvonne, do you accept?" Slap! A resounding crack echoed through the entire hall. The room went dead silent. Everyone froze in shock. Leo stood there, stunned, staring at the woman in front of him with pure disbelief. "Why? I thought you liked me." Yvonne's voice was like shards of ice. "Secretary Sarah, terminate all partnerships with Leo's firm immediately. And as for everyone who was just cheering, cut ties with their companies, too." Ignoring the frantic pleas and gasps for mercy, she kept her face an expressionless mask and walked straight toward me. But my mind was a fog. I hadn't processed a thing. The only sentence looping in my brain was, "She agreed to be with Leo." As I reached for another drink, a slender, pale hand snatched the glass away. Startled and ready to snap, I looked up, only to find myself staring into the freezing gaze of Yvonne. My anger vanished instantly. I averted my eyes, not daring to look her in the face. Back in the country for less than a day, and already this drunk? Julian, you're truly something else. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. What does it matter what I do? There's nothing left between us anyway. You said yes to Leo. Why bother with me? I was so far gone that I was trapped in the hallucination that she had accepted him. I hadn't heard a single word of her rejection. She looked down at me, and my jealousy mixed with pathetic desperation, and her anger seemed to melt away by half. Suddenly, she leaned down. A surge of strength pulled me upward. Before I knew it, she had scooped me up in a bridal carry. The wine left in my glass splashed across the front of her gown, soaking the fabric, but she didn't seem to care. She just tightened her grip and walked straight out of the hall. It was only then that the crowd finally snapped out of their daze, realizing who the big player really belonged to. The realization that the person CEO Yvonne truly cared about was me hit the room like a physical wave. The surrounding stares shifted instantly, turning into mocking sneers directed at Leo. The people who had been cheering for him just moments ago were now drowning in late regret, but no one dared to step forward or interfere. At the hotel's presidential suite, Yvonne hauled my drunken, limp body straight into the bathroom to clean me up. Looking at the man she hadn't seen in 3 years, she was caught between fury and helplessness. After my hair was dried, I began to stir, my consciousness drifting back. Seeing her sitting on the edge of the bed, I immediately tried to push her away. "You have Leo now. What are you looking for me for? Get away from me." She knit her brows, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "If I'm not looking for you, who should I be looking for? You drank yourself into this state. Are you trying to die? Are you planning to control my drinking now?" I challenged. Her gaze was so dark it felt like she was ready to swallow me whole. The woman who was once so gentle that she made me lose my mind was now looking at me like she wanted to eat me alive. "Fine. You're drunk, so you think you don't have to take responsibility, right?" I let out a cold huff. "Don't forget, I'm not your boyfriend. Go find your boyfriend for that." Hearing this, Yvonne let out a laugh so chilling it made me shiver. "You loved me, but didn't dare to confess. You slept with me for an entire month, and then turned your back and fled abroad for 3 years. And now you have the nerve to blame me?" I tried to stand up, but she suddenly pinned me back down onto the bed. Her eyes were burning with intensity as she gripped my chin firmly. Then, her lips pressed down against mine, silencing any further protest. At the same time, in another hotel, My best friend Victor was being actively seduced by a mysterious woman. Within minutes, he was completely lost in a haze of intoxication. The next morning, the sound of the alarm clock jolted me awake. My entire body ached and my mind was a fog. Catching sight of the faint red marks on my shoulder, I knew the truth. I had been thoroughly devoured by her last night. Fortunately, it was her and no one else. I put on the fresh clothes she had left for me on the chair, feeling a strange sense of relief. At the very least, last night proved that Yvonne didn't hate me anymore. I happily hailed a taxi to head to the office, and on the way, I even opened my contacts to unblock a number, one I had kept locked away for 3 years. But before I could even reach the building, my phone vibrated with a message from Victor. "Help! Julian, help me. Last night, I got lured in by Yvonne's secretary, Sarah. I ended up sleeping with her. Now, she says if I don't take responsibility, she's going to sue me. She even recorded a video. You have to save me." I looked at the message and let out a wry, pained laugh. I never expected Secretary Sarah to actually be interested in a guy like Victor. I gave him a half-hearted reply. "Just go with it, man. She clearly likes you." As I stepped out of the taxi, he messaged back, "I get it, Julian. Thanks." I smiled to myself, thinking today was surely going to be a lucky day. Inside the company, everyone I passed greeted me with a smile. But as soon as I stepped out of the elevator, I ran into Sarah. Her eyes were filled with pity. I was confused. Thinking about Victor's situation from last night, I asked, "Hey, you aren't seriously planning to sue Victor, are you?" She froze, her face turning bright red before she bolted into the elevator and disappeared. I didn't give it much thought and walked straight into Yvonne's office. She was sitting behind her desk, and the moment she looked at me, her eyes turned to ice. "The Overseas Project report," she said, her voice making me shiver. I stammered through the entire debrief. Leaving the room, my heart was still thudding against my ribs. She was so gentle last night. How is she a completely different person today? A few days later, I moved into Victor's place. My secretary told me that my villa had been reclaimed by Yvonne. Thinking back to that razor-sharp gaze in her office, I didn't dare go back. But you can avoid someone for a while. You can't avoid them forever. That night, the company held a gathering at a bar. I was pressured into drinking round after round. Everyone looked at me with that same strange, sympathetic gaze. By the time I was dead to the world, the door to the VIP room opened. It was Yvonne. Everyone immediately retreated and closed the door behind them. She walked over, looking at my sleeping form, the corner of her lips curling slightly. That night I dreamed. I dreamed that she and I were married. We had a little girl, as beautiful as a doll. The three of us lived together, warm and happy. Early the next morning, I felt something heavy on top of me. I opened my eyes to see a miniature version of Yvonne right in front of my face. Her large, round eyes watched me intently. "Daddy," the little girl cheered, throwing her arms around my neck. I froze in shock. I turned my head and saw Yvonne leaning against the pillows, smiling at me. Is this our child?" She knit her brows slightly, her voice a mix of tenderness and mockery. "What do you think? After how crazy you were that month, don't you remember? I found out I was pregnant shortly after you left. If you don't want this, I can have a doctor handle it." "No," I interrupted instantly, my eyes wide and my voice trembling. "Yvonne, don't say that." But the moment I met her steady gaze, I crumbled. "I'm sorry. Yvonne, please let me explain." Regarding the events of 3 years ago, she only smiled, a smile that made it seem as though she had known everything all along. Slowly, that smile faded, replaced by a cold, sharp smirk. "Daisy, sweetheart, go outside and play for a bit. Daddy and Mommy need to have a serious talk." "Good luck, Mommy. Give Daddy a good beating for me." The little girl scrambled off the bed, carefully closing the door behind her. I looked up at the woman standing before me. The look on her face was like ice. Before I could open my mouth, she cut me off. "Little brother, leaving me and our daughter alone for 3 years while you lived it up abroad. Was it fun? 3 years ago, you locked me up for a month. Starting today, you're going to stay in this room for an entire year. If you don't, your daughter and I will go find Leo." As soon as the words left her lips, a dominant, possessive kiss silenced me. I tried to pull away, only to realize that my hands and feet were already tightly bound. I recognized the material instantly. It was the same silver chain I had bought 3 years ago. Only this time, it had been divided into 4 segments, shackling my limbs to the bed. I didn't dare resist her punishment, nor did I feel any resentment. I couldn't bear the thought of my wife and daughter calling another man husband. Everything happening now was the karma I deserved. When you play a dangerous game, you eventually have to pay the debt. The only thing I regretted was taking that taxi driver's advice to run away. If I hadn't, I wouldn't be stuck in this bed for a year. Yet at the same time, I was grateful to him. If it wasn't for his advice to live for the moment, I might never have had the courage to claim Yvonne back then, and I wouldn't have the beautiful daughter I have now. No one can predict the future, but if you live fully in the present, you might just get what you want. 1 year later, this was my first time since returning to the country that I took my wife and daughter to an amusement park. For the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely happy. That evening, at the very peak of the giant Ferris wheel, my wife leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered in my ear, "Hubby, Daisy says she wants a little brother." I jumped, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. I couldn't believe that the woman I had hurt so deeply was still willing to have another child with me. Looking back, I realized how selfish I had been, trapping her for a month and then abandoning her for 3 years to raise a child alone while I lived a carefree life abroad. Yet, when I returned, she only punished me for a short time before agreeing to register our marriage. In that moment, I swore to myself that for the rest of my life, I would never leave them again. As the Ferris wheel reached its highest point, I looked at my daughter's sparkling eyes, took a deep breath, and knelt before them. I pulled out the ring I had been carrying. I had never officially confessed my feelings to Yvonne. Right there, in front of her daughter, I slid the ring onto the finger of the woman I had loved for 12 years. Later, as I was thinking about calling a taxi to go home, a familiar voice called out from the driver's seat. "Young man, it really is you. Haven't seen you in 3 years, and you already have a kid?" I looked up stunned. It was the same driver from all those years ago. "Yes, it's me. It's all thanks to you, sir. I owe you a dinner sometime." "No need for that," he laughed. "You and Ms. Yvonne really are a perfect match." He glanced through the rearview mirror, his eyes lingering on the woman sitting beside me. I instinctively looked at her, and my heart skipped a beat. A second later, she smiled and said, "We should bring him home to visit Dad and Mom sometime soon." In that instant, I finally understood everything. She had loved me from the very beginning. That was why she hadn't been truly angry when I forced her hand all those years ago. And the taxi driver? He was my father-in-law. It turns out the most dangerous hunter is always the one who hides in plain sight. The story ends here. Thank you everyone for listening.